The Arabic alphabet. Is it really as mysterious as many people tend to believe? First, we have to understand the landscape of Arabic sounds. It's quite different to, say, the English one. We'll concentrate on Standard Arabic. The sounds depicted here are pronounced more or less like in the received pronunciation of English. The R and the L are pronounced in a more Spanish way, R, L, as opposed to the American R's and L's. Let's fill in the grid with some more challenging sounds, moving backwards into the mouth. The underscored D's and T's are pronounced like English voiced and voiceless THs. The, th. They're usually replaced by adjacent sounds and dialects, but we're concentrating on classical pronunciation. These next two are pronounced quite like the English SH and J. Sh, J. The J, however, was originally a G and is still pronounced like that in Egyptian Arabic. We're getting to the throaty sounds, so typical of Arabic. These two are very similar to a French R, as in Paris, and a Scottish CH, as in Loch Ness. However, with clear friction at the uvula. That's the dangly bit in the back of your mouth. R, ch. Farther back, in the pharynx, the part of the throat above the Adam's apple, these next two are sitting. They're a choking sound, and not even jokingly, the Darth Vader sound. Lo, ho, o, and ho. Notice there are seemingly three H's, but they're completely distinct to an Arab. Khal means uncle, hal means situation, and hal means cardamom. Then we have the glottal stop. It's actually not voiced, but it contrasts with the aforementioned choking sound and fills the grid as if it were voiced. It's what some T's become in Cockney varieties. Better, or is that your hat? The Q, the Q, can be voiced in some dialects, but is voiceless in classical Arabic. The aforementioned uvula makes contact with the back of one's tongue and is then released. Q, not to be confused with a quote-unquote normal K. K versus Q. K, Q. The Q was originally a so-called emphatic sound, or even more originally a glottalized one. 4 additional teethy sounds are truly emphatic in Standard Arabic. They're pronounced with marked simultaneous pressure in the aforementioned pharynx. To, zo, so, do. Not to be confused with a simple t, z, s, d that also exists. So, to, zo, so, do versus t, z, s, d. The emphatics also color adjacent vowels darker. A, I, U become o, e, u. Notice the logic of the grid. 7 very Arabic sounds are denoted by dotted versions of basic letters. We'll get back to this phenomenon. 3 consonant letters are also used to denote the 3 long vowel phonemes of Arabic. A, I, U, or indeed O, U, U, when adjacent to the aforementioned emphatic sounds. Let's get to the order of letters in the alphabet, or actually abjad, an essentially consonantal alphabet. There are really only 15 basic letter shapes as depicted here. Feel free to pause and examine, not just here, but throughout the video. The other 13 letters are differently dotted versions of the basic shapes. Their order is from top to bottom, and then from right to left within the rows. Arabic is written from right to left, after all. Notice that 2 letters towards the end are differently dotted versions of a shape from the very beginning of the alphabet. Some letters are embellished with hooks when they appear isolated or in a final position, that is alone, or at the end of words, or indeed also within words when no other letter can be connected to the left. These isolated variants are usually and somewhat misleadingly taught as the basic letters, but the basic shapes are indeed the ones at the beginning or in the middle of groups, whereas the isolated variants are already and essentially embellished. There are 3 ways of connecting letters. The letters in the group highlighted in yellow connect rather simply. Initial and medial variants are essentially the same, as are the final and isolated ones. The grey group only possess final and isolated variants. The next letter will be disconnected even within a word. And finally, there are 3 shapes that will change more or less when connected. Feel free to pause and examine again. As far as the names are concerned, almost half of the letter names are just the consonantal sound that denotes plus an a. Ba, ta, tha, ha, etc. Whereas the rest still have names inherited from Aramaic and Phoenician. Jim, dal, dhal, zai, etc. A quick note on Persian, a prominent one, but just one of the numerous variants of the Arabic alphabet. A few letters for language-specific sounds may be added, such as the ones highlighted in yellow here. P, ch, j, g. The pronunciation might also shift according to the structure of the language, and Persian was originally as different to Arabic as English is. We see the shifted sounds highlighted in blue. And some letter shapes might also undergo modification, highlighted in red here. The bright red variants are especially prevalent in calligraphy or in more Eastern alphabets, such as the one used for Urdu. A few words on the shapes and dots. This is the repertoire of shapes, this time around with embellishment, that is the isolated letter shapes. As in most other writing systems, you'll find that features tend to cluster and repeat. We already noticed the heavy use of dotting to distinguish shapes that would otherwise have become indistinguishable. This is the so-called ijam. Here's an overview of identical shapes distinguished only by 1 or 2 dots above or below the line. Mnemonics are best left to the individual, but I think some of the ones depicted here are quite memorable. The rest of the dotted characters are largely very phonemically similar to their undotted counterparts, with a notable exception of the shin, which has 3 additional dots, because the dotting difference is usually just a single dot above the original shape, and the original might already have had dots itself. Persian finally made ample use of the 3 dots to create new characters. Even the stroke on the g evolved from 3 dots, although the stroked and 3 dotted variants coexist in some more Eastern varieties such as Uyghur, where the former is a g and the latter an ng. The Arabic alphabet evolved out of the Aramaic alphabet, itself heir to the even earlier Phoenician alphabet. That parallels the fact that the Aramaic language had been the lingua franca of West and Central Asia for many centuries. Language and writing are clearly distinct, but they obviously influence each other. This then is the original alphabetical order, called Abjadi, after the first 4 letters. We now understand why the Arabic alphabet and also similar ones are called abjads. This order, top to bottom and then right to left, is exactly the one still used in Hebrew, but also less known systems such as Syriac and Samaritan. 6 very Arabic sounds that were not required in Aramaic or Phoenician were newly created by dotting and then appended to the alphabet. Notice that the letters are also used as numbers, a widespread practice also perpetuated by the Greek and Hebrew alphabets, both grandchildren of the Phoenician alphabet. That is the writing, not the language, until modern times, when Indic positional numerals made their way from India through the Middle East to Europe. It is no coincidence then that the order of the Latin alphabet resembles the Aramaic or Phoenician one. The shapes, sounds and composition have been altered through the ages, but the parallels remain. The Latin alphabet, again the writing, not the language, came from the Phoenician alphabet through early Greek and Etruscan. The shapes became more angled here, and they were also mirrored due to the mirroring of the writing direction. Early Greek and Latin texts may run from right to left or even alternate directions between lines as well, by the way. Whereas the shapes didn't change direction and became increasingly more cursive through Aramaic, then Nabatean with an admixture of Syriac, all the way into Arabic. A historical juxtaposition clearly shows the parallels between Latin and Arabic though. Eventually, the Arabic alphabet was reordered. A group of dental sounds were inserted after the D, itself a dental sound, and the OPQ and KLMN groups kissed at the letters denoting K-like sounds. Other characters were grouped by shape when reinserted, and 3 weaker consonants concluded the alphabet. A few final remarks on vowels. Abjads, such as the Arabic, Aramaic, Hebrew and Phoenician alphabets, really only denote consonants, especially the farther back you go in time. This means you're essentially writing shorthand. Now imagine, jokingly, this was the case in English. Misunderstanding would be impossible, right? Since these kinds of alphabets were originally devised for Semitic languages, the case is somewhat different here. Semitic languages have a very elaborate root system. Basic semantic units are mostly comprised of 3 root consonants, interspersed with vowels and pre- or suffixed elements. Thus, the names Hamid, Ahmad, Mahmud and Muhammad are all from the same root hamada, which means to laud, to glorify. Only writing consonants does preserve and emphasize this root structure quite well. Quite early on, even already in Aramaic, at least the long vowels began being denoted by some of the letters for consonants, such as h, a, w or y, especially since some of them alternated with the corresponding long vowels in morphology anyway. Most short vowels, however, are usually not written until this very day in Arabic, Syriac or Hebrew. But there are diacritics for these short vowels, especially in religious texts, whose pronunciation needed to be preserved very reliably, but also in books for children who are still learning the script and have to recognize and memorize the missing vowels. These are then the diacritical marks used in such cases. There are marks for vowels, no vowels, the doubling of consonants, but also marks for ubiquitous grammatical endings. The very first letter of the alphabet, the alif, may denote the glottal stop as well as the long vowel a, which is why a system arose to distinguish the two. The glottal stop may be found on the line above an undotted hook or above letters such as the alif itself. Finally, a double alif is avoided and the combination of lam and alif is also disambiguated. The complete set of rules is quite complex. I won't go into specifics here. You may pause, examine and of course consult literature, also for all the aforementioned points above. That's that then. Cheers!